Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this epic time chamber series. My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like, join the Patreon, and subscribe to the page. Also, leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin.
Cross my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
The scene shifted abruptly to a dark, cold room, far beneath the palace of the Omni King. It wasn't a simple prison cell. It was a place of hopelessness, deep beneath the layers of existence itself. There, in heavy chains, sat someone all too familiar, Goku. He had been stripped of his Omni form after Xeno, the Omni King, removed the sacred aquafoam that had once empowered him. Now he was a prisoner, shackled and broken, captured by none other than the Daishinkan, the Grand Priest. But that wasn't the worst of it. No, the Grand Priest was much more twisted than that. In the corner of the dim cell floated a glowing orb, flickering with images Goku couldn't escape. The orb's cruel purpose was clear. It replayed the devastation of Earth over and over again. Goku had no choice but to watch as his home planet exploded, the fiery blast ripping it apart. He watched as his family, Chi-Chi, Goten, and even his friends, were all engulfed by the explosion. He believed they were gone, every single one of them, though he didn't know that they had actually escaped. His senses, normally so sharp, were dull in this realm, too weak to detect life from such a distant place. After all, Xeno's planet was located in the center of the three non-dimensions, far removed from the physical realm. Every time the explosion played, it felt like another knife in Goku's heart. He had fought so hard, risked everything to protect his world and the people he loved. But now, as far as he knew, it had all been for nothing. Even Vegeta, his fierce rival and closest ally, had perished along with Broly, whom Goku had lost track of during their separation. He had no idea what became of them. His heart raced, pounding in his chest as his mind spun. Anger surged through his veins like molten lava, bubbling up with an intensity he had never felt before. His eyes, normally so calm, now brimmed with tears of frustration and rage. He could feel power building inside of him, raw and untamed, but it was useless. The chains wrapped around his body weren't just any chains. No, these were forged by the Grand Priest himself, specifically to contain beings of unimaginable strength. In fact, these very chains had once been used to hold an entire universe, Universe 18, before Xeno had transferred it into his pocket dimension. The chains were universal, and no ordinary force could break them. And right now, Goku was far too weak to even try. Trapped in the silence of his cell, Goku's gaze remained fixed on the ground as he continued to watch the horrifying scene repeat endlessly in the orb. Earth exploded again and again and again. The Grand Priest had ensured this punishment was not just physical. It was mental torture of the highest order. How can I reverse this? Goku muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way out, but the situation seemed impossible. The Dragon Balls were gone, and with them, any chance of undoing the destruction of Earth. Even if he could somehow survive for 1,000 years, the time it would take for the Dragon Balls to be restored, it wouldn't matter. The Earth was destroyed, and with it, the Dragon Balls were lost forever. At that moment, the door to his cell creaked open, casting a long shadow into the room. The Grand Priest stepped in, his eyes gleaming with a cruel satisfaction. His lips twisted into a mocking smirk as he approached Goku. "Enjoying the show?" the Grand Priest asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He walked slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, as he circled Goku like a predator playing with its prey. "Well, it seems your chances of escape have dropped even further," he sneered, his cold gaze locking onto Goku's slumped form. Goku didn't respond, his fists clenched in silent fury. He could feel the weight of the Grand Priest's words pressing down on him, the hopelessness of his situation settling in deeper. "No one is coming to save you," the Grand Priest continued, his tone laced with condescension. "Not even your fellow Saiyan. It's almost poetic, don't you think?" He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "You fought so hard to protect them, and now, well, let's just say you're all alone." But what the Grand Priest wasn't revealing, at least not yet, was the truth. The Saiyans weren't dead. He had discovered this when Konik, a being made from his essence, had returned back to him. Upon Konik's return, All of their knowledge, memories, power, and experience had transferred directly to the Grand Priest. Through this link, the Grand Priest had learned the truth. The Saiyans had been forcefully teleported to an unknown dimension, one that Zeno himself had no control over. The Grand Priest chuckled softly to himself, reveling in Goku's despair, knowing that the truth was even more complex and cruel than Goku could imagine. And yet, Goku sat in silence, unaware of this revelation. His mind was a storm of grief, anger, and helplessness, trapped in a prison of both body and soul. The Grand Priest stood still, deep in thought, his usual confidence shaken. For some reason, he couldn't locate the universe where the Saiyans had been sent. The memories he absorbed from Konik were no help either. Konik, who prided himself on being the most skilled in teleportation techniques, was just as confused. His mind had been in total shock when it happened. He had no idea where he had been sent, who had done it, or even what kind of force could have created such a dimension. This baffled even the Grand Priest. After all, Konik was the top when it came to teleportation, a skill the Grand Priest had passed down to him. The 18 angels, who had once served the 18 gods of destruction in their respective universes, each possessed a dominant trait of the Grand Priest. They were extensions of his power, fragments of his incredible abilities. Vados held his raw strength, Whis carried his wisdom, and Konik mastered his teleportation. Together, they had made up the divine forces that maintained balance in the multiverse. However, when Zeno erased 5 of those universes, the Grand Priest's power had become fractured. But now, with all the angels returning to him, the Grand Priest was whole again. He should have been unstoppable, and yet no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't pinpoint this mysterious dimension. It was as if it didn't exist within any known realm. His frustration grew. Normally, he would report something this serious to the Omni King, Zeno. But Zeno was currently in the second dimension, a place beyond the Grand Priest's reach. The only way to access that realm was through the Fountain of Creation, which could only be activated with aquafoam, a rare substance that had already been used. The Grand Priest was stuck. Communicating with Zeno was impossible until he returned, and the Grand Priest wasn't one to wait. With no other options, he decided to handle this on his own. Before leaving Goku's cell, the Grand Priest gave him one final mocking gesture. He patted Goku on the head, a move that stung like salt in a wound. As he turned to walk out, he implanted a thought deep into Goku's mind, cementing the belief that everyone Goku loved was dead. The orb in the corner of the room, which showed the explosion of Earth, made it all the more convincing. "Goodbye, Goku," the Grand Priest said over his shoulder. "Enjoy the memories." Goku's body trembled with rage, his muscles tensed, and his energy spiked. But the chains, the ones created by the Grand Priest himself, drained his power just as quickly as it rose. No matter how much he tried to summon his strength, the chains clamped down tighter, sapping his ki like a leech. His mind was a whirlwind of anger, confusion, and loss. He had lost his Omniform, just as Vegeta had. Zeno's intervention had stripped them of that incredible power, and with that loss came a devastating realization. Both of them had lost control of a portion of their strength. The Omniform had once given Goku control over Universe 7. As the Omni King's chosen protector, Goku could draw energy from every living being in the entire universe. It was a well of limitless power, enough to break the chains that now bound him. But that power was gone, locked away deep inside him, dormant. It wasn't impossible to regain it, but it would require 10 times the effort of what it took to master the form originally. Without the Aquafoam to aid him, the path to reclaiming the Omniform seemed impossible. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to a cold, metallic ship cutting through the vastness of space. This wasn't the ship the Z-Warriors had escaped on. This was something else. Inside the capsule ship, 2 figures sat quietly. Frieza, his eyes gleaming with malice, and Beerus, the god of destruction, were on a mission of their own. They had one goal: find the Supreme Kai. Beerus had narrowly escaped death when Konik had almost taken his life earlier, but the cost was great. His divinity had been severed, leaving him vulnerable. Now, the only way to restore his power was to reunite with the Supreme Kai, his other half. Beerus leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed in frustration. "I can't believe I'm reduced to this," he muttered. Frieza, sitting across from him, gave a wicked grin. "It must sting, doesn't it, Lord Beerus? Knowing your fate is tied to someone so fragile." He chuckled darkly,
clearly enjoying Beerus's predicament.
Beerus scowled. Quiet, Frieza. I'll deal with you after I handle this.
Frieza raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. He knew better than to push Beerus too far, especially now when the god of destruction was on edge. Beerus's thoughts drifted back to his current situation. Originally, his life force had been linked to the Elder Supreme Kai, the most powerful of the Supreme Kais. But that was long ago, before Beerus had sealed him inside the Z-Sword. Once the Elder Kai was sealed, a new Supreme Kai had risen, Shin, who was only a Supreme Karai in training at the time. When Shin took the Elder Kai's place, Beerus's divinity and life force became linked to him instead. It infuriated Beerus to no end. Shin was weak compared to the Elder Kai, and knowing that his life was now tied to someone so vulnerable made Beerus feel trapped. There was no escaping it. If Shin were to die, Beerus would be dragged down with him. He had no choice but to coexist with this reality. As the ship continued to move through space, Beerus clenched his fist, his mind racing. Finding the Supreme Kai was his only option if he wanted to regain his divinity. Beerus reclined in his seat, arms crossed, his golden eyes fixed on the distant stars beyond the ship's window. Despite his calm exterior, his mind was churning. His journey to the sacred world of the Kais wasn't just about regaining his lost divinity by reuniting with Shin, the Supreme Kai. He had another, more pressing concern gnawing at him. Whis, the angel, his trusted advisor, had always been at his side, until now. There was something off about Whis' disappearance, something that didn't sit right with Beerus. The new world, the rebellion, the Saiyans' uprising, everything had spiraled into chaos, while Beerus had been sealed away, powerless to intervene. And now, Whis was missing. Konik had said something about Whis being gone, but Beerus couldn't bring himself to believe it. The angel couldn't be dead. He refused to believe it. The ship they were on, a sleek capsule corp model, was streaking through the universe at an alarming speed, hurtling toward its destination, the sacred world of the Kais. The map on the ship's dashboard indicated that they were less than 2 days away. But even with the ship's incredible velocity, Beerus felt the weight of time bearing down on him. He was impatient to see Shin, to confront him and demand answers. Answers about Whis, about the rebellion, about the Saiyans, about everything that had spiraled out of control during his absence. Beerus scowled. The universe had changed so much in his time sealed away, and not for the better. The Saiyans had started a rebellion, a war that had engulfed entire systems. Goku, Vegeta, and the rest of the Saiyans had defied the very order of the universe, turning everything upside down. And Whis should have been there, at Beerus' side, to help him make sense of it all. Yet, he was nowhere to be found. The god of destruction couldn't shake the feeling that something catastrophic had happened, and the thought filled him with a rare sense of dread. Across the cabin, another figure stood, staring out into the infinite void of space. Emperor Frieza. His silhouette, sharp and regal, was framed by the stars. A small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth as he gazed out, but the look in his eyes was far from serene.
Frieza's thoughts were as dark as the expanse before him. The Emperor had spent years, 10 long, grueling years, training in that cursed realm. He had poured every ounce of his will into pushing beyond his limits, attaining his newest form, Black Frieza, a form that should have granted him the ultimate power to crush the Saiyans once and for all. He had trained for this very moment, to finally rid himself of the Saiyan race, to destroy Goku, Vegeta, Broly, and the rest of their kind.
But things hadn't gone according to plan. Frieza's grip tightened as he recalled the moment when his ambitions had been shattered yet again. Beerus, despite his loss of divinity, was still more powerful than Frieza's black form, and Broly, that monstrous Saiyan, was even more terrifying than Frieza had anticipated. The sight of Broly's raw, untamed power had made Frieza's skin crawl. For all the strength he had gained, for all the sacrifices and the endless training, he still couldn't overcome the Saiyans. The thought infuriated him. His body trembled, not with fear, but with seething anger. The Saiyans, those filthy monkeys, a race he had once ruled over, had now surpassed him. It was unthinkable. It was unacceptable. He, Emperor Frieza, had always been their superior, their ruler, and yet now he was weaker than them. Weaker than Goku, than Vegeta, than even Broly. It was an insult to everything he stood for. Frieza's smile twisted into a sneer. his golden eyes narrowing as he stared out into the darkness. He had accepted Beerus's offer for a reason. The role of God of Destruction. The thought of it excited him. He had seen firsthand how Toppo's strength had magnified during the Tournament of Power, how his destructive power had reached new heights after he embraced his role as the God of Destruction for Universe 11. Frieza could only imagine what kind of power he would gain from assuming such a position for Universe 7. "I've seen what the title of God of Destruction can do," Frieza muttered under his breath, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I combine that power with my own potential, with my talent," his smile grew wider as the possibilities unfolded in his mind. The God of Destruction's power, combined with his own formidable strength and genius, would be unstoppable. The Saiyans, no matter how strong they became, would fall before him. And not just Goku, Vegeta, or Broly, all of them. Frieza's eyes gleamed with ambition. The Saiyans' offspring, their friends, their entire legacy. He would wipe them all out. And then, when the universe was rid of the Saiyans, Frieza wouldn't stop there. No, his ambitions were far greater than just Universe 7. He had set his sights on the multiverse itself. He would rise above the gods, above the Kais, above even the Omni King if it were possible. In his mind, it was fitting. After all, who could be more deserving of such power than he, the Emperor of the Universe? "Mark my words, Saiyans," Frieza whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "I will kill you all someday." As the ship hurtled through space toward its destination, Frieza's smile remained, twisted and dark, as his ambitions soared to new, terrifying heights. The scene shifted to a completely different universe, Universe 6, the domain ruled by none other than Lord Champa himself. In his palace, the God of Destruction sat at a massive banquet table, surrounded by food, his favorite pastime. But despite the usual feast spread before him, something was different. There was a tense air in the room, and Champa's face was twisted in confusion, his usual carefree attitude overshadowed by the troubling thoughts racing through his mind. Next to him stood Hit, the legendary assassin, his expression as unreadable as ever, and the Saiyans from planet Sandal, Kaba, Kefla, and the rest, who had all gathered to hear what was happening. This wasn't a casual gathering, this was war. Champa had barely escaped the fury of the Saiyans, and the truth of the situation weighed heavily on him. It wasn't just Goku and Vegeta. The Saiyans had started a rebellion unlike anything Champa had seen before, and they had already claimed the lives of gods. He owed his narrow escape to Belmod, another god of destruction who had since been captured by Azazel, one of the primordial demon gods. It was chaos, and no one truly knew how it had gotten this bad so quickly. Champa, as usual, tried to take comfort in food, but even as he stuffed his face with Earth's delicacies, his thoughts were miles away. What disturbed him most was what had happened to Vados, his angel. He had seen something no god was ever meant to see. One moment, Vados was at his side, calm as always, and then she transformed into pure energy, shooting off into space with a look of absolute confusion on her face. She didn't know what was happening to her, and neither did Champa. The moment haunted him. Was that death? He mumbled between bites, though the thought seemed absurd to him. Angels weren't supposed to die, yet he couldn't deny what he had seen. His mind kept drifting back to the possibility. After all, hadn't two angels already been killed by the Saiyans? He had tried reaching out to her, but there had been no answer, no presence, just silence. All he could remember were her last words. "Take care of yourself, Lord Champa." Frustration bubbled up inside him, and suddenly he slammed his fist on the table, food flying everywhere. "What is going on here?" he roared, his voice echoing through the grand hall. The Saiyans at his side jumped at the outburst. Champa continued to rant, his anger rising. What are the Grand Priest and Zeno doing? Do they not plan to intervene? He had asked Vados these very questions before she disappeared, but she had never given him a clear answer. Now he was left in the dark, unsure of what to do next. "Lord Champa," Hit spoke up, his voice steady but calm. "You said the Saiyans were coming here to kill you, but I find it hard to believe that Goku would do something like that." Kaba quickly nodded in agreement, stepping forward. "Yeah, Master Vegeta isn't the type to attack without reason. This doesn't make sense." Champa's eyes bulged with anger, and a thick vein popped out on his forehead. "Shut your mouths!" he bellowed, slamming his fists on the table again. "How dare you question me? You are my playthings, and you will do as I say." His outburst stunned everyone into silence, but Champa wasn't done.
He continued, his voice dripping with panic and anger as he lied through his teeth.
The Saiyans have turned. They attacked without warning. They've already killed 10 gods of destruction, including Belmont. Kaba, Hit, Kefla, and the others froze, wide-eyed. The weight of Champa's words hit them like a punch to the gut. 10 gods of destruction? Was such a thing even possible? Kefla stood up abruptly, her eyes narrowing as she pointed an accusatory finger at Champa. "Bullshit!" she shouted. "You expect me to believe that? Sure, the Saiyans are strong, but killing 10 gods of destruction? That's impossible. The Goku and Vegeta I fought in the Tournament of Power were strong, but not that strong. No one can kill gods like that." Her words echoed through the room, but Champa just scowled, refusing to back down. Hit, as calm as always, stood silently, his arms crossed, but inside, he was stunned. If Champa was telling the truth, then the Saiyans had reached a level of power far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Light years beyond anything he could fathom. Still, something didn't sit right with him. There were too many gaps in Champa's story, too many things that didn't add up.
Why would the gods allow this? Hit thought to himself. If the Saiyans were really this powerful, where were the angels? Where were Zeno and the Grand Priest? Surely they would have intervened by now.
Hit's sharp instincts told him that Champa was hiding something, leaving out crucial details. But for now, he kept his thoughts to himself, silently watching as Champa continued his frantic rant. Champa's words were meant to instill fear, to justify his own panic, but instead, they left the room in a state of disbelief. None of them truly believed the Saiyans could have done something like this, not without help, not without some greater force pushing them to such extremes. And though Hit remained calm, his mind raced with possibilities. Could the Saiyans really have surpassed the gods? Or was there more at play here? Something bigger, something darker lurking behind the scenes. Hit stood silently, his sharp eyes narrowing as he processed Champa's wild claims. He had faced Goku and Vegeta before. He knew their personalities, their honor, and their limit. Neither of them was the type to just wake up one day and decide to attack a god of destruction. To Hit, that was nothing short of a death wish. Why would the Saiyans do something so reckless?
He muttered to himself, deep in thought. Vegeta's too proud, and Goku, he's too forgiving, too childish. There's no way they'd launch an unprovoked assault on gods.
It didn't add up. The pieces of the puzzle Champa was trying to force together didn't fit, and Hit's instincts told him something was missing. Champa isn't telling the full truth, he thought to himself, his suspicion growing with every word the god of destruction spat out in his panic. Whatever had really happened, Hit was certain there was more to the story than Champa was letting on. But before he could question it further, a dark and unsettling presence made itself known. The air around them seemed to thicken, the temperature dropping ever so slightly. Something was approaching, something dangerous. Hit's senses, always honed like a blade, picked up on it immediately. He straightened, his sharp eyes scanning the area as the atmosphere became tense. This was no ordinary energy. Whoever, or whatever, was out there had been hiding its presence for a long time. The figure finally revealed itself, stepping out from the shadows of the palace. It was a being of immense darkness, his aura crackling with a sinister, almost otherworldly energy. His presence was like a cold whisper, sending shivers down the spines of everyone in the room. He was tall, his skin a deep charcoal black, with glowing red eyes that pierced through the gloom.
The being was none other than Mephistopheles, one of the last 3 primordial demon gods.
Champa's usual bluster vanished in an instant. His eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, he stopped stuffing food into his mouth. "Whoa, what is this?" he stammered, his voice a mixture of confusion and fear. He had no idea who this being was, but one thing was far certain. He knew the being was powerful.
Mephistopheles had been in Universe 6 for quite some time now, but he had expertly masked his energy, lurking in the shadows. He was the weakest of the primordial demon gods, a fact that had always weighed heavily on him. Long ago, before the great war between the demons and angels, he had only just risen to the level of a primordial demon god. Before that, he had been what was known as an archdemon, a powerful but still developing entity that was recently promoted to the ranks of the primordial demon gods. He had barely begun to understand the full extent of his powers when the angels attacked.
During that war, the angels had sealed him away, just like the other primordial demons. They had been at full strength for millennia, but Mephistopheles was different. He was still new to his power, still learning how to wield it. The attack had come too soon, and he had been locked away before he could truly master his abilities. Now that he was free, he was biding his time, waiting for the right moment to strike. Mephistopheles possessed the rare and dangerous Dark Siphon ability, which allowed him to absorb divine ki from any being possessing divine ki that wishes to harm him, making their energy his own. But the power came with limitations. He couldn't just absorb energy from someone far stronger than him and hope to survive a battle. The siphon only worked if his opponent's strength was somewhat close to his own. If he wasn't strong enough to endure their attacks, the Dark Siphon would be useless. That was the limitation of a new turn, primordial demon god. His level of master over the Dark Siphoning was not yet close to the level of the other demon gods. This was why Mephistopheles had kept his distance, hiding from the powerful angels that once roamed Universe 6. Margarita, Champa's angel, and her siblings had been too powerful for him to challenge directly. Mephistopheles knew better than to pick a fight he couldn't win. Even with his siphon ability, he would have been no match for two angels. So he had waited, lurking in the shadows, watching and waiting for the moment when the angels would disappear. Now, with Vados and the other angels gone, the time to make his move had finally arrived. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.